Russia says the BRICS has never worked to undermine other countries. The clarification from Moscow comes after the US President Donald Trump threatened to impose a 10% tariff on states aligning themselves with anti-American policies. The sentiment was also reiterated by China and South Africa, which said the grouping was not seeking confrontation. BRICS leaders are currently meeting in Brazil.
Действительно видели такие заявления президента Трампа, но здесь очень важно.
We have indeed seen such statements by President Trump, but it is very important to note here that the uniqueness of groups like BRICS is that it is a group of countries that share common approaches and a common worldview on how to cooperate based on their own interests. And this cooperation within BRICS has never been and never will be directed against any third countries.
Никогда не было и не будет направлено против каких-то третьих стран.
Now, for more on this story, we can go across to correspondent Jan Onoszko standing by in Rio. Jan, multiple clarifications coming out from BRICS leaders of what exactly the grouping stands for.
Absolutely. It certainly feels like the BRICS bloc is suffering an identity crisis. Now, when it was set up back in 2009 by the four major emerging economies in the world, that is Brazil, Russia, India, and China, it had the explicit aim of creating a more multipolar world. So that in itself could potentially be interpreted as being anti-American, and it really did want to establish itself as a counterweight to the G7 group of the world's biggest economies. Now, one of the problems that the BRICS group has had is the fact that it has expanded so rapidly and now includes 11 countries, all very different in terms of their economies, their styles of government, and their interests. So that really makes it difficult for them to make any progress. Even though it's a larger group, it now accounts for almost half the world's population and almost 40% of the world's GDP. It is seen as being a bit rudderless, almost leaderless, and that has been exacerbated by the fact that the Chinese leader Xi Jinping has decided to skip the summit for the first time since he became China's leader, and he only gave the reason that he had a conflict in his agenda.
Now, given that Xi Jinping is not at the summit and they're all coming out, these leaders, and clarifying what exactly the grouping stands for, what's come out of this meeting in Brazil so far?
Well, the summit is still ongoing, but they have already issued their final joint statement. And if we look at that statement, it's called the Global South Stands Together. The Global South, Strengthening Global South Cooperation, rather, for more inclusive and sustainable governance. The language within it is very muted, it's very weak. So, for example, when we look at some of the geopolitical issues it addresses, like the attacks on Iran being a member of the BRICS bloc, it condemns those attacks, but without mentioning either Israel or the US. With Gaza, it's a bit more forthright. It calls for the immediate withdrawal of Israeli troops and a ceasefire on the Palestinian territory. And even when it comes to tariffs and an issue which all the members agree on, it talks about its concern over the rise in tariffs and non-tariff trade barriers, but without specifically mentioning either Trump or the US. Obviously, Trump got that message because he's now threatening to put an extra 10% tariff on those countries that align with anti-American policies, let's say. So if the BRICS summit here has achieved anything, perhaps it has been to exacerbate this trade war with the US.